Welcome to Playing Above the Line, where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and community activists to get their thoughts and perspectives on leadership. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group, a business consulting and accounting firm focused on preparing clients for the future through innovation and positive growth. Welcome to Playing Above the Line. I'm Alan, your host, and we are recording today at the Hatch in downtown Fairhope. And as always, we appreciate Rick Miller opening up his space to us until we can get to our new studio on the campus of Coastal Alabama. And if you want to check out what Rick does at the Hatch, you can go to hatchfairhope.com. So our guest today, and we've got a good one. Our guest today is Adam Chronister, and he is the founder and owner of Pelican Point Advisors. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
All right, let's jump in because we've got a lot to cover. I mean, you're a fellow podcast guy. You're an entrepreneur, obviously, because you've founded this company. But talk a little bit about what exactly Pelican Point Advisors does, if you don't mind.
Well, we do a lot. So basically, we are a data visualization, a financial data visualization, and AI-aided planning software. But we also bring on an operational component by being able to integrate with operational softwares. So really, our vision is to combine financial and operational data so that we can look at businesses in a whole different way. There's a big separation between those two components. So, our mission is to close that gap. But we also have a development arm as well. So we're able to help companies really develop by using our existing code and our existing platform to allow them to create a whole new software in about a third of the time and a third of the cost.
Gotcha. I understood about a third of what you just said. So my technical knowledge is very shallow, but I do find it interesting. We talk a lot, or we have talked a lot in the past on this podcast about whether entrepreneurs and leaders are born or made. And, most people kind of come down somewhere in the middle. But I firmly believe that you have to have something special inside to be able to do what you have done and to start a business from scratch. So has that always been something that you aspire to do even from a young age? I mean, how do you come about starting a technology company?
I live with the principle of always challenging myself. I read a book when I was in the 7th grade that I'm sure everybody's read. It was Old Man and the Sea. And it was one of the most impactful things I've ever read because it made me challenge kind of the status quo and never be comfortable. So I've always lived my career as challenging myself in the uncomfortable. And this is about as uncomfortable as anybody could possibly get.
Pelican Advisors was formed when? How long have you been around?
It's been about 4 years, but
okay.
we evolved quite significantly, really. My goal when I originally started was more of consultative and not technology. I came from the dental world and where I led a dental supply company or a branch of a dental supply company locally. And when I left that company, I really wanted to help dentists who were in that latter stage of their careers, help them really through that whole succession or that exit strategy, because I saw so many of them, and it honestly just broke my heart, that would rely on the retirement of their business or the sale of their business to aid in their retirement. And as they became older, they worked less, and the value of the practice just declined to some of them zero.
Yeah.
So I really started off wanting to help them from a consultative approach and ended up working with a dentist. And, it wasn't just me, but at the end of the year, working with him, we doubled the guy's profit. And then I knew I was onto something, and I created this 250-page Excel spreadsheet that nobody in their right mind but me was going to read. Yeah. So it really started with turning that Excel spreadsheet into a usable software.
Yeah.
And the long story from there is Pelican was created, took about 2 years really to create it. And when I went to market with it, even though I had beta testers, I had an oh crap moment because dentists were lifestyle business owners, like many business owners around here. The majority of them are. And they didn't want it. They wanted somebody else to really tell them what they needed to work on.
Yeah.
And they'll go do it.
Right.
But they wanted somebody else because they don't have the time, which led me to actually accounting firms.
Gotcha. So you mentioned Pelican. That's the software that you guys, or application you guys have developed. I would say that visionary is probably a pretty good way to describe you. I mean, you saw a need, you adjusted based on your experiences and that kind of thing. So how important is vision in what you do? And then how do you go about getting your team to kind of fall in line behind what that vision of yours is?
So I think in leadership, vision is obviously in the top 3.
Yeah. People
have to have a vision because it gives you something to work towards. And really, success is defined by, how well you complete your vision or work towards your vision. I think vision's ever evolving. I know that mine is. And I tend to look too far forward sometimes. A vision sometimes gets me in the way of being an integrator. And I think in business, you also need integrators. And that's a quality that I probably need to work on.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of vision, what is your vision for Pelican Point Advisors, 5 years down the road? Where do you think you want to be?
So one of the things that I really have become passionate about is helping other people start businesses. So if I can use my code in an effective way to allow that barrier of entry to become much, much less significant. Because the two biggest barriers of entry to any business is capital and time. So if I can reuse a lot of the code that I have to make it quicker and cheaper for people to start businesses, it's something I really want to work. That's really where I want to work towards.
Okay, good. And so the other two things you mentioned were integrity and accountability, which we've heard those two words mentioned before when we've asked people the same question, but I'm interested to hear what your take is. Give me the importance of those two things through the prism of your experience in your life.
Sure. So I've learned from positive influence and negative influence. And I think most negative influence comes with the lack of integrity or honesty. So I think in leadership, that is the core of who you are. Mm-hmm. You've got to be a leader, you've got to be honest with your team. Yeah. And as far as accountability, I think that's a two-way street. Mm-hmm. It's accountability of your team and accountability of yourself. Yeah. Because as a leader, you're in a unique position. You've got to hold yourself accountable or find other people to help hold you accountable.
I agree. And, I think I think a lot of times, sometimes I've had experiences with leaders where they're real good at the accountability when I'm holding you accountable. But as far as me holding myself accountable, not so much. That self-accountability, yep. I think, is something that you'll hear a lot of people talk about its importance, but I don't think you hear a lot of people that really practice it like they should. I don't know what your experience is, but that's been mine over the years.
So I think an accountability partner, someone outside of your business, is super important. And I have one, and it's Rick Miller here at the Hatch. He's my accountability partner. I meet with Rick every Friday morning and tell him the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between, right?
Right.
And it gives me a sense of I don't want to let him down. Mm-hmm. So it keeps me motivated and grounded. Yeah. I hold myself accountable through that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And we ask you to check a few boxes on what you kind of want to talk about or focus on. And one of the things that you checked was leading and coaching and mentoring. And not that your accountability partner necessarily has to be your mentor, but that could be the case. But can you speak to the importance of coaching and mentoring, and then maybe give us someone or a couple of people who have been mentors to you in your career?
Sure. Yeah, I had a mentor when I entered the dental world. His name was Michael Brack, and he was a branch manager when I got in. And I came from the restaurant industry where leading, coaching, and mentoring really doesn't exist. It's a feast or famine type industry.
Right.
And he was really the first true mentor that I really had. He was very patient with me, allowed me to make mistakes, which I think is important as well, because we all learn from mistakes. So he was probably, from a selling standpoint, the biggest impact I've ever had. He was very, very good at selling, and I learned a lot from him, because we're always selling, mm-hmm. regardless of whether we're selling or not selling. Right. We're selling our business or ourselves or whatnot, and he helped coach me through a lot of that. So I think that having mentors is from going from not having mentors to actually having mentors is it's mission critical, I think.
So do you think it's one of those make or break things? So in other words, do you think someone who's out there that's thinking about starting a business or whatever, doing something that's maybe outside the box or their comfort zone, do you think that they can't do it without a mentor? I know that's probably, it's hard for me to ask you to speculate on that, but as far as your personal opinion, do you think it's a have to have?
I think it's a have to have, especially early on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I use a phrase all the time that, there's a lot of knowledge out there and very little wisdom.
Yeah.
So, go find the wisdom.
That's great advice. All right, I've got to ask this, and I long for the day where I don't have to bring this up. But right now, as we're recording this, we're still I'm talking about in the throes of this COVID-19 pandemic that we're facing. And you also kind of mentioned that leading through crisis and change was something that you wanted to expand on a little bit. I've got to imagine that being a business owner in this time is, number one, stressful, but number two, you've had to make some changes and pivot, which is a word we've used a lot. So can you talk about kind of how this pandemic has affected your own business and what you've done to kind of circle the wagon, so to speak, and make sure that everything is going the direction it needs to go?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously this pandemic is horrible for a lot of people. And, I think managing a business at any time is stressful, and you have to be adaptable. If you're not adaptable as a business owner, then you're going to die pretty quickly, mm-hmm. regardless of what, the situations are. So one of the things that I was fortunate is that I'm a cloud-based software business that promotes people being able to work remotely. Yeah. So as bad as it sounds, there's been a lot of opportunity within it as well.
Right. Well, I think one of the keys to being successful is to take advantage of the hand you're dealt, right? Mm-hmm. And so, absolutely. We've talked to other people since this whole thing has started where their business has actually thrived and increased because of the circumstances surrounding the pandemic. None of us would wish for those circumstances to be that way, but I think that separates the wheat from the chaff sometimes whenever people take that adversity and the problems and they make the best of them. So I think that's great. All right, let's talk about Mama for a minute. I love this. I asked you to give me the name of a leader you admire, and it was like my mom. So what about Mom?
We could get into a long philosophical conversation about that, but more, I'm just proud of who she has strived to become, both personally and professionally. You know, she's the vice president of economic development and research at South Alabama, and she worked really, really hard to get to the position she's at. And it through a lot of moving and adversity and things like that. So, you know, as I saw her challenge herself, it helped me challenge myself as well. She kind of paved that road for me.
No doubt. And I think another hallmark of a good leader is typically they have someone to model the way. Right. Look, if you don't have to look any farther than your mom or your dad, maybe you're a grandparent or something, you can't beat that for sure.
Yep.
Let me circle back. So this is Leadership Podcast.
Yep.
Give me when I say leader or leadership, give me your definition or what you think about that when I say those two words.
It's leading a group of people to a certain vision. I mean, I don't think it's a really complex thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we make it super complex, but one thing I've learned through working in several different industries, working with several different, people, leadership is different for everybody, and how I lead people is going to be different based on who that person is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's being able to share a vision and having people work towards that vision with you.
Yeah, vision, that word keeps coming up over and over and over again. I mean, vision, you can't be a leader without having a vision and knowing how to impart that to other people. I totally agree with that. So, we've done this podcast for a couple of years now, and you actually have started your own podcast, and I know it's in the initial stages. You've recorded 2 or 3 episodes, and I don't know that they're released yet, but at some point they will be out there. And so the name of the podcast is Purity of Idea, and it's technology-based, right?
It is technology-based. So Rick Miller and I both had a kind of a vision and an idea of creating a podcast where we can interview people really basically on what they think that technology is going to be like in 5-10 years. And what were those first things that you remember from a technology standpoint? Like for me, I remember a Commodore 64, which I know that dates me, and I know I'm not supposed to date myself, but it was a Commodore 64. And my brother had it, and he had this modem, and it was an old school modem that was basically a telephone that you put on a pad. And that was like the first internet. And I remember him playing games with his friends, and I just thought how cool that was. And that was really my first touch of technology. And to be where we are now from that is amazing. Really, the idea is the purity of idea of people creating, softwares or what that technology is going to be in 5-10 years, and just having fun with it. That's
very cool. And you're right. I mean, the rate of change is astounding. And we're probably the same age because I do remember having the, I think it might have been a Commodore 64. But anyway, you had the little tape deck where you put the tape deck in the little, it looked like a tape player, but it was like a floppy disk before floppy disks were a thing, right?
Absolutely.
And so we've come from there in a span of probably, 35, 40 years to, the phone that I've got over here beside me is, the technology is greater in that phone than they used to fly the first space shuttle. Right. So
absolutely,
I think you guys have hit the nail on the head with that. But the thing I'm most excited about is you have outfitted a first-class studio over on coastal Alabama's Fairhope campus, and we're going to be lucky enough once this whole pandemic wraps up to be able to record our episodes there. So, and again, talking about vision, you had a vision 3 years ago where you bought that equipment, and it sounds like if you're going to do something right, you're going to do it first class. And so, so we're pretty excited about that. So we appreciate the forethought that you had to do that.
And I'm excited for you to use it. I'm excited for the community to use it. I think it should be fun. I really do.
So, talk about community. I mean, how important is it, do you think, to give back to the community that you live in?
Super important. Going back to leading and coaching and mentoring and those kind of things, I think your community really, really helps prepare you in all that, especially starting a business. So, if I were to give somebody advice for starting a business, number one would be buckle up. And what do I mean by buckle up? It's get your personal securities in line, get your professional securities in line, meaning people around you. So if you don't have a strong community to pull from, it's really, really hard to start a business.
Yeah, no doubt. So are you a big reader? Podcast? Well, are you a podcast guy? I mean, you got a podcast, so do you listen to a lot?
I do listen to a lot. I listen to yours.
I mean, that should be the top of everyone's list. I don't want to.
It's on the top. I subscribed.
I'll pay you later. So give me a book, author, podcast that you like, that it doesn't have to be business related, but it can be. I mean, something that's had an impact on you.
So I love Business Wars.
Okay.
The Legal Wars is out now from a podcast standpoint. I love hearing the history of business, how these businesses really came to be. And then coming from grassroots to being these super large corporate entities and, how they battle as well. So really love Business Wars.
Okay. I don't know that that's one that's been mentioned, but I'll have to check that one out. So since you're a technology guy, just get your crystal ball out and kind of dust it off. I mean, where do you think that we're going to be technology-wise, let's say in 20 years? Because thinking about where we've come from in the past 30, 35 years from a Commodore 64 computer that you hooked up to your TV and you had a cassette tape deck disc drive thing to where we are now, what is your vision for where you think we might be, let's say, in 20 years? I mean, what are my kids going to be doing with their kids whenever they come along?
Sure. Right now we're in the data revolution, really. It's the gold mine of, it's like the 1864 or whatever, gold rush in California, whatever year that was, 1849. That is data right now. So you have a lot of people going out and trying to get data, searching for data. But really the next evolution of that is the delivery of data and how we consume it. And right now we have a lot of data that we consume. And we're going through this natural revolution, and we're getting into RPAs, which is a robotic process automation. So with that, RPAs are going to be able to bring a lot of data together to make it super simple for you to understand things. And then really to a point to where, from a data standpoint, you won't even think about it.
No.
You just wake up and this is what we need to work on.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in the day of big data. And I think that a lot of folks, or there's a lot of talk about what's the best profession to be in or the best major to study or be in when you're in school. And I think anything that revolves around data and data analytics is going to be huge the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Sure. So you have two. You've got the creators and you've got the supporters. So you're going to have people that are out there. The creatives are your developers, and your supporters are like your IT support.
Yeah.
So those are both going to be in really high demand over the next 10 years. 10 to 15 years.
Agreed. I just hope I'm around to see it all, so that's going to be exciting. All right, last question. I haven't gotten the old time machine out in a while, so we get the Visor Group time machine out and let you hop in. Where do you go? Do you go back in history, or do you go into the future? Do you go to a specific moment in time? I mean, where, if I gave you the opportunity just to go anywhere in the past or in the future, I mean, where would you want to end up?
So I've got a degree in archaeology. I love history and I love the past because they've already paved the future for us. We just got to learn what they did.
Yeah. Love it. Well, Adam, that's great. I mean, you're right. We can learn a lot by looking at the past, and so I think you're spot on there. If folks want to learn more about you and your company, they can go to Pelident.com. That is Pelident.com to learn more about you guys and what you do. Adam, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I truly enjoyed it.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. It definitely helps us in the ratings, and it also makes it easier for other folks to find the podcast. And as always, a big thank you to producer and editor Carrie Wolf. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at avisogroup.com. That's AVIZO group.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.